Hello and welcome everybody to Booze Hour Community Edition today. We're in season 2 now. We're well on our way. This is our 3rd episode into season 2. Got some more cool guests lined up, including Ty, who will be speaking in a little bit here, and a couple more after that. Before we bring on Ty, a couple things that I wanted to talk about though. If you are watching this from LinkedIn right now, that's great. I'm streaming on there. There's also a YouTube channel as well. So if you head over to youtube.com/DarylandBoo, you'll find this stream on there. It should be live right now. And then if you are on YouTube right now and you encountered us somewhere on there, there should be a subscribe button that's either down here or just over here. If you want to go ahead and click that, then you'll know exactly when we go live and when these are scheduled. And you'll see all the other content that we have on there as well. So especially relevant to customers of mine, folks that are users of F5. We go through a lot of updates and news in the world of F5. And we have a weekly Monday show and some other videos that we post up on there as well. So check that out. There's also DarylandBoo.com. We run a mailing list on there. You can check out all of the content. Again, keeping up to date on things in the world of F5. And I also want to thank our community partners for Booze Hour. So you can see my branding. I have completely sold out here as far as clothing. So I have my Okta hat on and my HashiCorp shirt, and We Hack Purple and Equinix, all great friends of the show, and I thank you very much for supporting the show. So without further ado, I am really looking forward to this conversation here. If you didn't check out the video that I posted, I put it up on the Instagram and on the LinkedIn, but I made my best effort to put up my little avatar that I get out of my Apple device. And I think everybody's going to be probably going to have some sort of one of these digital representations of themselves in the near future, if you don't have one already. I know when that feature first came out on the iPhone, I was excited to throw up what I thought I looked like myself in digital format, and it's always fun to be able to interact that way. But I think there's a lot of really cool use cases for this, and that's why I wanted to talk about that just in when it comes to digital transformation and the way that people are communicating now. That representation of yourself, I think, is going to become really important in a digital sense, just like how you want to present yourself in the physical world as well. So Ty is one of my good buddies. He is one of the strongest guys I know, actually, and I was going to dig out a video of him deadlifting crazy amounts of weight here, but I'll save that for another video. But without further ado, I'll bring him on. He is the Chief Operating Officer at Taffy, Tys Duperron. Ty, welcome to the show.
Hey, buddy. I like your intro. It was really cool.
Yeah, cool. I was going to pull out a couple videos, but I don't know if people would have been able to connect this face with the face that would have been on the video there. So maybe we'll reveal your real face at some other point here. But thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Hey, hang on a sec. I can quickly, if you want to see a different face, I can give you a different face.
Okay.
That's the beauty of the avatars. I have a couple loaded here, including one of, I can impersonate our Chief Strategy Officer here in a sec. And so you'll see I am now our Chief Strategy Officer, Preston. So
oh, wow.
I built him an avatar, and then I can, or if this, if you want, maybe this is a formal conversation since, you're a business specific show. So I can, get a little bit more serious for this conversation. If, that's a little more appropriate for the audience here, I'll put my tie on and get a little serious. So
that tie matches the color scheme of the Booze Hour logo, actually.
No, that was. I'd like to say that was intentional, but it's also Taffy's color is pink. So just
Okay.
a nice convenient choice there. But yeah, so
Nice.
it's interesting. I'm one of the
Yeah.
few people though that uses an avatar that kind of looks like me, like similar to the one you did in your video on your Memoji. I use myself as my template, whereas other people don't.
Okay. Um, so you've been in this industry for not just the gaming industry, and I know there's applications to this outside of gaming, but you've been in this industry of avatars for quite a while at this point. Maybe you can talk us through, some of your background and how you got to this point now, being with Taffy.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think the thing that was interesting is I didn't actually start into this looking to do tech of any kind or video games. I really wanted to be a comic book artist and like a Disney animator. Like that was what I was really into as a kid. And as I got older, I just wasn't good enough at drawing. So I got into digital art and I was going to go work in film. And I did that for a little while. And then I ended up in video games. I got my start at a local studio called Hellbank Games, run by a good friend of mine, Chris Mayer, probably one of the best guys you'll ever meet, and still a mentor of mine. And I cut my teeth there and learned how digital creation worked, but also runtime, like video game builds. And it was kind of this generalist environment because we were a small indie studio that I had to learn a little bit about everything. And then when I joined another company called Disruptive Publishers, we were working on the Xbox 360 avatars. And that was about 10 years ago that I started down that avatar path. And I've been doing that ever since. I worked through this 360. We worked with the Xbox One. We built some avatar engines. And then I started my own company a little over 2 years ago. And one of my first clients was Taffy Daz. And I remember my first meeting with them. They were like, hey, we need to make these avatars for VR chat. And this is actually the avatar I'm wearing. And I was like, okay. And so they sent me what they wanted to build. And I was just planning to be an art outhouse exporter for them, like an external studio. And they sent me what they wanted to build. And I remember looking at the list, and I was working with a guy named Berkeley Fry at the time. And I was going, Berk, I can make this for you, but this isn't what you want. And he was like, well, what do you mean? And I was like, well, there's fundamental things you need in a digital character creator or an avatar engine and what they were trying to build was more of like a paper doll. Like they had made so many choices for the user that the user was picking from a subset of choices rather than creating their own identity. And so I was like, hey, like it's just been my experience that these are the things you want. But I also was a new company and I didn't want to lose the contract. So I was like, I'll build whatever you want. Like I'm here for commerce, but like if you really want to be effective with your avatars, we should look at it this way. And then my next meeting was with the CEO and the president of the company. And they were basically like, all right, who are you? And why are you telling us what to do? And it was like, okay, I'm sorry. I didn't know them at all. So I was super intimidated. And I kind of made my pitch. And next thing I knew, I was on a plane going down to Silicon Valley. And we were pitching Samsung and other big players. And the rest is history. They basically told me I couldn't go home without joining them full time, and it was awesome, and it's best decision. I really enjoyed the journey. It's a really cool group.
Oh wow, that's a pretty cool story, and I think we'll dig into that a bit more. Maybe we can kind of dig into where you started with avatars on the Xbox platform. Yep. Was that at the point where you're basically just creating the layers on top, like the clothing and the faces and whatnot?
Yeah. So the company I worked with was called Disruptive Publishers, and they were one of like 4 or 5 companies that could create premium content. So Xbox had the base figures, they had the closet, like the stuff you would use to edit your avatar. But anything on top of that, if you wanted an NBA hat or a Halo costume or even just cool layered clothing, that was our team, run by a guy named Gary Lai, who's like knows more about avatars than everybody. I told Gary, because Gary actually works at Taffy now. He helped me open the Vancouver studio. I remember telling Gary, it's like we accidentally became experts at this because it's just what we did and nobody else did it, right? It's not like we set out going, oh, we're going to become avatar experts. It was just, we just kept trying to do cooler things and try and do things that resonated with us in the audience. And so, yeah, like I would argue that Gary's probably one of the leading avatar experts in the world. And it's not like we went to school for avatars. It just kind of happened. You know what I mean? Like, and so, yeah, we built the layers on top. We would build hairs, costumes, pants, shoes, stuff like that. And you had to be clever with how you did it because the system, and this is probably more than you care to know, but the Xbox 360 system was built by a company called Rare. And it was really just for Kinect sports. So the Kinect had just come out. They wanted motion, control, and they needed like basically a version of the Nintendo Mii's that could drive that. And so it was never designed to be this broad feature or this like this real like marketplace that it turned into. But they leveraged that technology and offered it on the dashboard, and it just exploded and really kind of started this trend.
That is pretty interesting in that that I like when you refer to it as an identity, that was the first time I really thought of it as an identity. And now I look at how my kids play Fortnite.
Yep.
And they want V-Bucks because they want to buy clothes for Fortnite. And I'm like, why are you spending all this money inside this game for these clothes that don't exist in the real world? But, from talking to you, I start to get it. Like, when they enter a game, they want it to be personal and they want to look cool, even though their friends are, they know their friends in real life, but they want to look cool in the digital format. So I guess, even as far back as Xbox or the Xbox stuff you're working on there, I think people are already seeing that.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's interesting, I mean, like the term avatar, right, it came from Richard Garrett back in the Ultima 4 days. It's actually a game called Quest of the Avatar. And that was when it first really showed up. But then it started being used more and more in video games because they wanted you to connect the choices you made with the character. So if the character didn't represent you, you could make different choices, right? So if I was not my avatar, if I was just, let's use GTA as a good example. If I was just playing Grand Theft Auto, I'm playing as another character. So there's a disconnect between how I represent myself and the choices I make because I know I don't have to own them. That digital person on screen doesn't represent me. Now, when you start talking about an avatar, the concept, because it's a Hindu term, right? It's the gods on the earth that are representations of the gods. So they're driving these avatars. It's so in the video game space, it's the same idea. When you talk about your kids playing Fortnite, well, their avatar is how they've chose to represent themselves. So they're connected to the decisions they make in the game space. But then that also means the identity of that avatar is as important to them, and that digital equity, like that cool factor in the digital space, is just as important, and to some kids more important than the IRL space. And that's where it gets really interesting because now, like when I played video games, I'm gonna date myself a little bit. I didn't have like a lot of connection to the video because multiplayer games were relatively new. I mean, other than like Warcraft and StarCraft, there weren't a lot of choices for multiplayer games, and MMOs came later. So you weren't really tied to the choices your avatar made. Think of the Super Nintendo. If you played those games, like you didn't really feel emotionally attached to Mario. Like you didn't feel like, oh, I made a bad choice stomping on that mushroom, and you couldn't really like build any kind of cool factor, or I wouldn't show off my Mario to you. It was basically the same. The only place that started to show up was in Street Fighter. Kids would learn how to switch to the black Ryu because it was cooler, and you'd be like, oh, how'd you do that? And that was just their way of being like, oh, I'm a little bit more meta than you.
I was just going to bring that up because over here is my MAME arcade that always has Street Fighter 2 playing in the background.
Attaboy.
And I was just about to mention that that was the earliest that I could think of, like associating myself with a character, tying myself to something.
And it was important to you to be that version of the character, right? Like, like that was, and so now, your digital, like back then you had Street Fighter, but now you text message. I mean, COVID's made us, every phone call is a video conference. Every coffee is a video conference. Your family activities are hangouts. Like, I mean, you and I were working out together over video conference. And so your video games, your videos, all these things are these divided, fractured experiences, and everybody's trying to make each piece just a little bit more their own, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty cool. And so maybe as we kind of go through your timeline here, you're working on this Xbox stuff. You ended up going independent, and then connecting with Taffy and Daz. So you're saying what they had was they had the layers on top, and you came to them and said, okay, that's great, but you also need to be able to build the facility to layer all this stuff on top of.
No, so Taffy had, part of what made me interested is they were building an SDK, and that's the base layer. And what was really interesting about the SDK as a whole was, so Taffy is spun out of a company called Daz 3D, and any old school 3D people will know what Daz 3D is. It's connected to an old application called Poser, and it was built to be this character system, and it can do very realistic characters. But over the years, it was designed as this concept. There's this community that grew to allow digital artists to make content and sell their content that wouldn't otherwise be like, not like me, not someone who went to school, worked at a studio, but like someone who just at home made this content and wanted to be able to sell it. And it created this community. But to do that, to allow those creators to make content, there was a bunch of problems related to a character or related to the clothing of a character that had to be solved in order to facilitate that. Now, fast forward, VR starts coming out. This is like 3-ish years ago, I guess. VR starts coming out. VR has 9 different headsets. You got Pico, you got Vive, you got like Oculus. You got all these kind of choices. Some are mobile based, some are PC based, whatever. And Taffy came out of this concept of, well, what if we could make the Daz experience runtime? What if we could have the ability to edit the face, edit the clothes, apply this same t-shirt I'm wearing to fat people, strong people, skinny people, zombies, doesn't matter, without the creator having to rebuild it? And they set to solve that problem. But at the same time, they also had to solve the problem of the different hardwares and the different softwares, iOS versus Android or whatever. I mean, stuff I'm sure you're very familiar with the work you do. And by doing that, they created this SDK. But what they were trying to do was deploy this SDK with one of our partners, VR Chat. And that's when they came to me and said, hey, we need to build a library of content. And most avatar engines will ship with about 1,000 pieces of content. It's just a good round number. One thing about creating avatars, everybody wants more stuff. Everybody, like, you always missed something. It's always like, well, why didn't you have a curly mustache? Or why didn't you have a better, like, there's always something somebody wants you don't have. So you need like enough content that it feels robust and the user has enough choices, but also you have to ship something, right? And then it's just a living thing. And so anyway, they had this SDK and they had originally hired my company to help them build the content. And so, yeah, I was just going to build the content like I did on the way back on the 360. And that was when it was like, well, okay, but you guys have this other technology that you're leveraging for this. If we took a step back, what about these other choices? And that's where it became more of a deeper relationship. And I got to have a little bit more impact, but then I recruited Gary and a few other people and thought, okay, let's like, what can we really do now that we can actually attack, the details? And like, if we were to design an avatar from scratch, what does that look like without having a client tell us how we should or shouldn't do it? And that became super interesting.
Yeah, wow. That's pretty cool. So where would people find this SDK today? Like, where is it implemented?
Yeah, so right now you can download our creator from maketaffy.com. There is an application you can play with, and you can export it into VR Chat. In a couple months, I want to say, we'll have a few other exports, including video conference calls like this, which is really cool. That's with another partner we're working with that we'll be announcing soon. And so, yeah, that'll be really cool. And we have test builds that work like 60 frames per second on Android, which is super cool. It works on high-end VR headsets, low-end VR headsets, all without the user having to change the avatar. Like it's the same avatar the user creates at once, which is super cool. But yeah, right now, if you wanted to play with it, maketaffy.com and you can grab our editor.
Well, that's interesting. So if somebody were to like they create their digital identity with the avatar, is it stored centrally somewhere and it's kind of portable across systems?
Yeah, yeah, and sorry, and then I should say the other place if you wanted to play with our avatar content is if anybody who has a Galaxy phone. So we do all the content for like all the premium content on AR emoji is built with Taffy on our partnership there. So if you have a Galaxy phone, it's built in, it's easy peasy. And yeah, I mean, I'm not the technical guy, so I'm sure like if our CTO is listening, I'll butcher this. But essentially, we have everything is like we can do an offline or an online mode, but everything streams from this like central marketplace and content management system, which is the same system we use for DAS. It's web based, and it allows creators to submit content, our entire review team and QA team to process the content, and then ship that content, and you can monetize it if you want. We support cash or we support digital currency. Let's say you want to do coins like V-Bucks you mentioned. And one of the cool things about our SDK, provided the users of the SDK, like the different developers agree, you can share content between experiences. So let's say, you had the Booze Hour virtual world you were building, and I had, my Taffy world. You could, with our SDK, share your avatar between those spaces.
That's pretty neat. I was actually checking out, some of the virtual conferences that are happening right
Sure.
now, and maybe you can, you have some comments on this, but they're trying to turn conferences into VR experiences, and you have your guy, and I was able to go in and kind of, manipulate my guy to a certain degree on there. But have you seen a lot of business applications in the past year to avatars?
Yeah. So what's interesting about avatars is like a character editor is super expensive to build, right? Like it's not an easy thing for people to include in an experience. It's often, I think, underestimated the challenges that are aligned. So that's why you'll see a lot of systems will do like, look, here's a T-shirt, change the color. Here's 4 heads, or here's some pre-built characters, use those. And that works okay. But let's say, you're starting talking about business or any other kind of intimate conversation. Like if you and I are business partners and we're having a business conversation, you want to know, like you want to be able to recognize me at a glance, especially at a conference. Now you're talking about like rooms full of people. You need to be able to go, okay, that's Boo over there. But if there's 5 choices, there's going to be 16 Boos, and I have to read your name tag. I don't recognize you at a glance, and then there's a disconnect in the conversation. So having personalized avatars allows you to have more of that presence. Like that distance. Like you close that distance because it's like, I mean, yeah, this isn't exactly what I look like, but you could recognize me and pick me out in a crowd. That's Ty. I'm just a little bit prettier in real life, I'm sure. But that becomes super important, right? Especially in a business environment, because this is going to sound weird, but it's already kind of uncomfortable. You're always more on in a business experience than you are just hanging out. And so like you add that level of anxiety, then you add the fact that now people are on camera and you can see yourself. It just adds this layer of anxiety that avatars can kind of add some, not levity to, but at the same time, just a little bit more like you're more present because you're recognizable, but you're also gives you that nice disconnect because it's not exactly you, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And does this force uniqueness, like to the point where you can customize so many different things? I can imagine that it'd be pretty hard to replicate different things unless you were sitting side by side and 2 people were configuring an avatar at the same time. Everybody's probably going to come out pretty unique depending on what they do, right?
Yeah, and what happens is like you can also like I can't really demo it right now, but one of the things we offer is like color tinting, which is another thing that not every system does. But you can imagine some people represent themselves. I'll go into this in a little more detail in a second here, but I'll just answer your question and then I'll add some color. That wasn't meant to be a pun. But people will change the color of their skin, and that alone, like some people want to be yellow, red, purple, like, and that all of a sudden like makes such a difference. And then how you combine the parts. Once you start editing the face, it's very unlikely you're going to pick exactly the same, pull exactly the same levers, wear the exact same thing as someone else. So it does add a variant by default. And like you could actually tell someone, and we've done this before as we've done builds, I could give you an avatar recipe and your avatar would come out slightly different than mine just because of how I would tweak the colors. Or, you know, if I said, because I wouldn't necessarily tell you exactly what beard to pick. I'd be like, hey, make a bearded guy. Okay, well, what beard you pick versus what beard I pick will be slightly different. And so even if it's a variance, a slight variance, there's always some kind of variance. And sure, like two people could load the default avatar, but that's also a user choice, right? If you want to be a little more anonymous, you can do that. If you think of avatars and you start thinking about that virtual identity concept, that digital identity, I kind of break it down. There's like three types of people that use avatars. So there's the people like me. This is generally what I look like in real life. Now my beard's a little bit nicer groomed and I don't have my tattoos. But other than that, this is essentially me. And any game I play, any avatar engine I use, I make a bald guy with a red beard and blue eyes and kind of work from there, right? Like that's my default. And it's kind of like when I go to a bakery, I'll always get the vanilla cupcake to find out if they're any good. And then I'll explore beyond that. It's like, it's a level set. But for me, even when I play MMOs or RPGs or any other digital experience, I make a guy that looks pretty much like me. And I'm super uncreative when I come up with nicknames. I'm always Ty or some variation of Ty. And that's just how I represent myself digitally. Other people want to show some piece of their fandom. So imagine like you really like mountain biking. So you would have, you know, the mountain bike prop, your helmet on, like your Fox armor. And like, that's not something you would wear all the time normally, but like, that's something you want people to know about you and your personality. So you kind of like broadcast it. Or think of Comic-Con, you know, like you probably wouldn't show up to a boardroom meeting or a sales call in a Wonder Woman costume or a Batman cowl. But if I did in this avatar to this call, you probably wouldn't even blink. You'd be like, oh, that's neat. Like, that's cool. And so it gives you that freedom to express yourself. So that's like category number 2. Then category number 3, and this is the one that becomes really interesting, is what I call like people's true selves. So like in the real world, you're given a bunch of cards. You're just dealt a bunch of cards you can't do anything about, right? And I think in the world, it's pretty clear with like non-binary and all these other ways people choose to identify themselves. And what's fundamentally core to their being, they have to fight for, and they have to argue for, and they have to battle for. In the digital space, you get to create who you are from zero. Like there's no rules, there's no restrictions. And I mean, it's the avatar system's responsibility to make sure that's true. But fundamentally, you could be anything. And imagine a kid who has MS or something and they're wheelchair bound. Well, they don't necessarily want to be weak and in the wheelchair in their avatar, they might want to be a big dragon dude or an orc or an ogre or whatever. And because in their head, that's what they want to be. That's the aspiration. And that's where that digital identity really becomes interesting, because they can show something that they couldn't show otherwise. I mean, when I started an avatar as part of my research, led me to Second Life, and there was a magazine that covered how there's a bunch of people who were early adopters, and they were LGBTQ people and primarily trans people. And I think I told you this story when we were prepping for this, and it was like, there was this one really stood out to me, and she said, you know, in real life, I will always be considered a trans woman, but in Second Life, I'm just Cindy. And it was like so powerful to me, because it's like, she gets to decide how she's represented. And that's where all of a sudden, this isn't just like your Bitmoji. You know what I mean? Like it's not just a cartoon. It's something that is fundamental to people. And if you take that forward into business, imagine a world where like you could have, we're already seeing it, but you have your meetings between Vancouver and Shanghai and whatever, but you can actually be present. You can emote. You can express yourself. You can take notes. You can share. You can collaborate. And this is what a lot of XR companies are working on right now, is this concept of remote collaboration where you actually are present in that conversation. And that's where, so now avatars become even more important because you are actually representing yourself in more walks of life. You don't have to think in real life of, okay, well, I'm going to go to CrossFit. Oh, do I look like Boo? Okay, now I'm going to go to work. Do I still look like Boo? You just do. And so that's where this persistency starts to become really interesting, and that hasn't been solved yet.
That is interesting. I like the idea of well, you see it with like Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg, like they have almost their uniform.
Sure.
People recognize them for that. And so you it's not a thing anymore. It's like, that's just the person that they are. They didn't they didn't have that extra thing that, hey, today I'm going to be different through this. I just want to be me, and you'll recognize me as me, and let's carry on with our business now.
Yeah.
We're kind of gone past step 2 there, or step 1. So I like that idea. It's really cool, and kind of using digital identities to just move conversations forward past things that shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, and you also exactly it just gets you to okay, this is me. Here's where we're at, and you got to think, if you take that even out of social and into business, you imagine with these virtual conferences, you do 2 or 3 on 3 different platforms. Every platform, you're like, okay, hey everybody, I'm Boo. Remember, me from Boo's Hour. Like, okay, I got to remember the guy in the blue hat's Boo. It looks nothing like Boo, but I got to remember that it's Boo. And then you're in the next conversation, and you go to a different platform, and it's like, okay, everybody, I'm Boo. Remember, you know what I mean? You have to start fresh every time, and yeah, it's just anyway.
Yeah, and I like the conferences is a good point too, in that with. Maybe IT conferences isn't going to be the best example, because you could be at an IT conference and you'll have somebody who shows up in a t-shirt with, maybe this is extreme, but Cheeto stains and stuff all over it. And that person could be one of the most brilliant people at his company and controls a huge amount of budget. And from a sales perspective, it's very important to establish a good relationship with them. But, you have it in your head that, hey, this person looks a little bit different or whatever. They didn't shower today, and it's going to be harder for me to interact with them. But you could do away with all that kind of stuff. They can just, be their own perception of themselves, and you'll just receive that and then carry on.
Well, yeah, and VR Chat's a great example of that, because when they started, they didn't build avatars. They just built a platform where people could implement avatars. So they have people that are literally sides of French fries, or black blobs, or people driving little mech suits, or I saw French toast once, and it just allows for you're not going to judge the French toast guy because you don't know anything about him, right? But now every time you see him, okay, the French toast guy is that guy that owns that division for whatever company. I remember me and Pierre really get along. You know what I mean? It just, you recognize people as you would in real life.
Very cool. And what do you think, where do you think this is all headed? Now I'm only kind of understanding the whole idea of my kids wanting to buy the latest clothes in Fortnite. Before, I just thought it was a waste of money, but now I sort of start to get that they want to look unique. But where do you think, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years away from ahead of now, where do you think the applications are of avatars?
So it's going to be sooner than you think. 5 years from now, it'll be well established. I think what you're going to start to see, it's a term that's tossed around a lot, but the metaverse. The metaverse is used. I think you've probably seen Ready Player One, but the concept of the metaverse is essentially digital experiences driven instead of real world experiences, right? So you bring your personality into these experiences. You collect. You have digital equity essentially, and this is stuff that matters to you. And digital clout, digital equity, that kind of thing. And I mean, you're already seeing it on Instagram, like Instagram follow, like, or even YouTube, one of your platforms is built around this concept of digital clout. Like none of that's real. It's all built on these content creators, right? And so the metaverse, and like people look at it as a metaverse, I think you're going to have multiple metaverses for a while. Like I think, because you already have Roblox, which is essentially a metaverse. You have competitors for Roblox, like Metacore Games, that are showing up. I mean, Epic just announced a huge investment in what they're trying to build for an Unreal metaverse, which includes, their MetaHuman system, which is digital humans. They are looking at taking Fall Guys and Fortnite and finding a way to combine those so you can take yourself between those. And I mean, this is all me speculating, but they put a ton of money into the metaverse. And I think what you're going to see is people's digital clout, their digital equity is just as important to them as real world equity. I mean, you're seeing that right now with NFTs on the blockchain. People are investing a lot of money into things that only exist digitally because to them, that world and that part of their life is as important as other aspects of their life. And I think that, like I said, that digital clout is going to become more and more important to people and become more and more part of their lives. And if you think of your kids, well, they grew up with opportunities to play Fortnite. They've grown up with microtransactions in games. They've grown up buying digital goods. It's not weird to them. It's not foreign. For us, you and me, I mean, it's my business, so I understand it, but we had to cross a threshold, right? Like we had to accept it as an idea and then get our heads right with it. That I'm going to give you $5 for a digital hat I never actually see. Like you had to like get your head around that having any kind of real value for you, right? But like my niece, my nephew, your kids, they don't need that. Like for them, they understand the value because inherently to them, and I mean, if you think about it, they're spending hours in that world. If you have to spend hours anywhere, you're going to want to, like, let's say you played a racquetball for five years and you spent 4 hours a day. You'd probably buy a nicer racket, or you'd invest in like goggles you liked, or like look at all the stupid clothes we bought for CrossFit because that's what you did. Like it didn't make us better at CrossFit. It was just you wanted that style, and when you were working out, you wanted, I wanted a Batman Under Armour shirt, so I went and got it. This is that same concept. It's just their interactions are now digital, and that's where. So you're going to see that more and more, and it's going to start moving outside of games. Games just got there first. You're going to start to see these conferences. You're going to be able to go to conferences and buy digital merch or digital souvenirs, or you want to speak at an event or have a booth. You could buy an NFT, and that gives you access to this digital real estate. And you're starting to see that with Decentraland and other groups like that. But all these ideas that different people are experimenting with are going to eventually coalesce. And as long as you're dealing with digital experiences and digital environments, there will always be a need for that identity piece. And what's cool about that, I mean, look at this. I'll try to not go too far down a tangent. But when's the last time you saw a real car in a car commercial that wasn't a local auto lot commercial, like an actual professional car line, like BMW or Volvo or whatever? Those are all CG. A lot of them are shot in Unreal. So they're real-time rendered. You're starting to see that with actors and with models. And like one of our partners is a company called The Digitals, and they literally make virtual supermodels. They don't exist. They're not real people. And they're doing campaigns with Vogue, with Lexus, with Samsung, like leading campaigns. And you're going to see more and more of that. There's a famous Instagram model, Little Michaela, doesn't exist, has millions of followers. And so people are then able to experiment beyond just digital goods, but also, digital celebrities. And it's really cool because it's essentially like no holds barred, right? Whatever you can imagine this new future can give. And then as AI becomes more interesting, as voice modulation becomes more interesting, you're going to literally be able to show up on a call, dressed like Darth Vader, sounding like Darth Vader, to like cheer up, let's say your daughter grows up, has a family, moves to Toronto, you'll be able to like show up on Christmas digitally in an XR environment or a VR environment and interact with those kids like as if you were there. And I think that's where it's gonna be so interesting, man. Like it's like work and video games are gonna get there first because it's a requirement and it's just what's interesting. But end of the day, it's gonna get into everybody's lives. I'll give you another example, and then I'll shut up. But my mom has a place in Hawaii, right? And so she has this place she bought with her dad. He passed on, so it's got this like really like key emotional attachment to her, and she hasn't been able to go. It's COVID, right? So for like 2 years, she hasn't been to this house. So I hired somebody I knew to go to the house, to the beach, with a 360 VR camera and film a VR video. And then I gave my mom an Oculus Quest, which is like the easiest VR to use. No wires, super easy to set up. And her and my grandma now can sit on this beach at their Hawaii house for like 30 minutes and just chill, to the point that my mom now can activate that by herself, load the VR, doesn't have like the first time she called me walking her through it was an absolute nightmare. The first time she like lost the app, she's like, I don't know what to do. We got her up and running, and now she just like, and once you get past that, or my Mamere, right, born in the 40s, uses her iPad and FaceTimes everybody because she had to figure it out. And so you're actually going to see this start to be like Facebook. You're going to have the young guy, early adopters, people who get it. And then before long, it's going to get into that, like your mom, your grandma, they'll start using it. And once that happens, then it's just part of life. And I'm really excited. I think it's going to be really cool.
That is such a cool use case, actually. I didn't really think of that, but the idea that, you can immerse yourself in these environments with people from far away, and that avatar is kind of an essential piece to being able to share that experience with someone else.
Yeah, and what's cool about VR, and like I don't want to just harp on VR, but like XR as in general. I mean, look at Pokemon Go as a really basic example. Is it created a shared experience. So like XR experiences are more than just a game where you just, even multiplayer game, you're playing a solo flat screen. People remember XR and VR experiences as actual experiences. So yeah, I just think that's going to be super interesting.
Super cool. Well, Ty, we've gone over time a little bit, but I am grateful for the time that you've spent with me sharing all of that stuff. I think we could have gone on forever, actually. I have other questions that I'll ping you with about this kind of stuff, but we'll park the live stream here for now. I'll say thank you to We Hack Purple, to Equinix, Okta, and HashiCorp for supporting the show, and encourage everybody to hit subscribe. It should be below Ty, actually, the subscribe button. And if you're watching from LinkedIn and you haven't followed me on there already, hit follow on that, and then you'll see when I go live in future. So thank you very much, Ty, for jumping on. Really appreciate it. One of these days, we will have you on without the avatar on, and everybody will get to see how beautiful your beard is as well.
Thanks, brother.
All right. Bye now.